And YouTube says that I am live. Good evening, Gordon Causey, as always. And as always, guess who's here? Come on up. Penny the Wonder Pup. She got out for a walk today. She's happy. Oh, she loves that word. No, you already had your WALK. Good girl. But I have her treat. And if you're new to my station, intrigued by my prediction, I guess you could call it, that strong possibility that I think Ontario will be facing a snap election call by the Ford government, and I'll explain the reasons why. But before I do that, my dog expects a treat at the start of every video, so shake a paw, lay down, speak, speak. Yeah, she's in good voice tonight. And there she is. I'll remind you now, live chat is always on, although I don't think anyone's watching at this specific moment. I'll put the live chat on. And today it's the 16th of November, 2024. Time is 10:03 p.m. here in the Eastern time zone. That's Toronto, New York, Montreal, down the Eastern Seaboard. Anyway, before I really get rolling, I'll remind you that if you like the content, if you'll hit the like button, it's always appreciated. And if you're not subscribed and you think I have something worthwhile, something relevant to say into the public, injecting my voice into the public discourse, you're welcome to subscribe. 1,080-ish, whatever I'm at, for a miserable, pathetic YouTube station, no production values, just a lone voice in the wilderness, for lack of a better word. So why am I expecting an election call? Couple reasons. It had been on my mind previously. I know I've made this point before, that the way that elections in Ontario result based on who the governing power in Ottawa is. You can almost predict with near certainty which provincial party will win a provincial election in Ontario based on who the governing party is in Ottawa. And so that's one aspect. And the point I'm making is that when there is a Liberal government in Ottawa, it bodes well when there's a provincial election for the Conservative Party. And that's been true. There have been 17 elections in my lifetime, and I'm going to go through that in just a little bit. Second reason, though, is that I was having a conversation today with a local politician, someone with whom I'm friends, and he's of a conservative bent, and he's far more dialed in to Conservative Party politics at the provincial level than I am. And he and I were talking politics, as we often do. This gentleman, I have helped him campaign on 2 occasions. And I don't like to toot my own horn too much, but I also don't want to totally dismiss what I've been able to do. And this gentleman has won 2 elections. He unseated an incumbent mayor. And I think at least part of the reason he did it was because of a branding statement that I told him to go with. And the second time, when he ran for reelection, I was able to help him counter a persistent whisper campaign that had been leveled against him. And at any rate, it was this gentleman telling me that he's expecting an election at the latest this spring. I had said, it makes sense to me that there would be a provincial election before a federal election. And he said, oh, yeah, it's going to happen before the spring. I'm hearing rumblings, spring at the latest. And makes perfect sense. And I'm going to explain why. Betty Zoom is saying good evening to myself and to everyone here. John 5 is here saying good evening, calling me Mr. Causey, making me feel old. Thank you for that. I much prefer Gordon to Mr. or Sir or any other salutation. John brings up the fact that I mentioned the TV series Utopia from the UK in a stream, and I have. There are two versions of it. One was an American version, might have been on HBO or one of the American streaming networks. It was an adaptation of the original British, and it's a quote unquote fictional, some would say predictive programming story. And I shared it. But unfortunately, that was one of my videos that went down the Orwellian memory hole because I was talking about an agenda that I'm just going to stay away from the topic. I'll talk around it, but I won't talk directly to it again. But it's a theme that you see echoed in, there's a book that came out in the late 60s, right around 1970, a year or two before or after 1970, right in that window. And the book was called The Population Bomb. And then the movie, another movie that came out was called Soylent Green. And you could reference the Hunger Games and this one Utopia as well. Holy cow, I now have 5 people watching. John 5 is asking about the Canada Post situation. This is de rigueur. It's Christmas time. And the Liberals have already gotten into trouble with the rail unions in this country by intervening. They're trying to walk that tightrope of being pro-business, pro-labor, and they're, you know, when you try and please everyone, you please nobody. And let me get to the point at hand, the subject of this video, why I think we're heading to an election. I think it could be a snap election call. I think we could see it in a week, in a month. And I agree with my local politician friend who thinks it's coming spring at the latest. HM has joined in, Heather, and Betty Zoom. John 5 writes, Doug, if you're asking if that's the name of the local politician, no, it's not. I'm not going to say his name. Goodness knows he follows my content on Facebook, and I share my live videos to my Facebook feed. So it's possible he might watch this. But at any rate, in my lifetime, 58 years of age, born 1966, by my count, there have been 17 elections. I actually went through just to make sure I had everything lined up properly. So our last provincial election was in 2022. In Ottawa, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are the governing party. Who did we elect? We elected Ford government to a second consecutive majority term. The previous election to that was in 2018. Justin Trudeau was prime minister at that time as well, and that's when Ford was elected to his first majority mandate. Go back to the election before that, 2014. At that time, in 2014, that was a year before Justin Trudeau came onto the scene. The country was still ruled by the Harper Conservatives, and that's when Kathleen Wynne and the Liberal Party won. Are you sensing a trend? Liberals in Ottawa, we elect Conservatives. In Ontario, Conservatives in Ottawa, we elect Liberals in Ontario. Go back to 2011. Harper is still prime minister, and it was Dalton McGuinty's Liberals that won. And in the election before that, in 2007, it was Harper in Ottawa, and the McGuinty Liberals won again. So that's the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elections in a row. Ontario always elects a government opposite to what the governing party in Ottawa is. In 2003, we get the one anomaly in my lifetime, the one true anomaly. And in 2003, we were in the closing days of the Chrétien Liberal government. He was about to pass the baton over to Paul Martin, and the Liberals were now sliding. And at this time, the McGuinty Liberals in Ontario still won. So that was the one election, 2003, where with a Liberal government in Ottawa, the voters of Ontario elected a Liberal government to Queen's Park. You go to the election before that, though, 1999, Mike Harris was elected as the Conservative Premier of Ontario. Jean Chrétien was, and the Liberals were in Ottawa. 1995, Mike Harris and the Conservatives win in Queen's Park. Jean Chrétien and the Liberals were the governing party in Ottawa. In 1990, Bob Rae and the NDP managed to secure a majority government, and that was when Brian Mulroney and the Conservatives were in power. The election before that, it was David Peterson who won a mandate, while the Peterson Liberals won, while Mulroney's Conservatives were in Ottawa. And there's one mild anomaly, and that's 1985. The Conservatives were ruling in Ottawa, and Frank Miller was leading the Conservatives, and the Conservatives managed to barely win a majority mandate. Or sorry, not a majority. The Frank Miller's Conservatives won a minority mandate, razor thin minority. They had 52 seats out of 125. The Conservatives had 52, Liberals 48, and the NDP 25. And what happened was Frank Miller's Conservatives were unable to govern. As soon as they were voted out of office, they were voted no confidence almost immediately, within a month or two of forming the government. The government was defeated. And rather than go to an election, David Peterson, the leader of the Liberals, went to the lieutenant governor and said, I have the support of the NDP, a supply confidence agreement like Justin Trudeau had with the NDP under Singh. And so Peterson was able to assume. And the Liberals in that election had won the popular vote, but they lost the seat count. And then every election before that, Bill Davis, Conservative, and Bill Davis won 4 elections in a row, Conservative, 71, 75, 77, 81, all while Pierre Elliott Trudeau was in power. Before Bill Davis, it was John Robarts, and he won while Lester B. Pearson, Liberal, was in Ottawa. And in 1963, same thing, it was Lester B. Pearson, and Robarts won again. So every election but one. And so I think it's reasonable for people living in Ontario to expect that we're going to see a snap election at any point. It could come within days, it could come within weeks. I don't expect it to last until the spring at the latest. Let me catch up on what is being said. When the reference to Doug was to Dougie Ford. Our Globe and Mail did a great expose on him when he was in high school in Etobicoke, where they chronicled his drug dealing out of a plaza, out of a convenience store type plaza in Etobicoke. He was famous for dealing hash, and also he and his brothers kidnapping someone who owed them like $10,000. One of their dealers owed them something in the neighborhood of 10 grand, according to the Globe and Mail article expose that they did on it. Doug Ford threatened to sue. He said it was full of lies and it was slanderous and all this, and he was going to sue. And full of hot air, he never did. I'm not a fan of Doug Ford. I'm not a fan of the Liberals either. I'm becoming less and less a fan of any politician of any stripe in this country as time goes on. HM is writing, Doug must be too young to see what happened to David Peterson in the early 90s. He thought he could win too. David Peterson, that election when Bob Rae snuck up the middle, and that was the 1990 election. I remember it well. What had happened was Peterson had become premier with the help of the NDP backing him. And what the cost to David Peterson in terms of, what do you want? Bob Rae wanted an end to extra billing because at that time, and it's something that's starting up again in Ontario, now we have doctors charging fees for services that are not covered by OHIP. That's referred to as extra billing. It's, from my understanding, at least it used to be, and I assume it still is, but I may be wrong, extra billing contravenes what's called the Canada Health Act. And because we were contravening the Canada Health Act, Ottawa withheld certain transfer payments to Ontario for health funding. And so Bob Rae's cost, if you want us to support you and make you premier, then you have to end extra billing. And David Peterson did. But then there was a scandal, and I'm trying to remember the woman's name. There was there were some scandals involving the Peterson Liberals, and what happened was Bob Rae snuck up the middle, managed to win a majority government with only about 36% of the vote. The vote was almost perfectly three-way split, with the NDP coming out only marginally in front, but they split up the middle in just enough ridings to gain a majority government, and they actually let it run the full 5 years. At that time, an election did not have to be called for 5 years, and they ran it the full 5 years, and then they got decimated. And I honestly don't think that Bob Rae did a horrible job. I think he did no better or worse than any other government has done. One of the things he did at that time, we had a massive recession, and what he did was, with the provincial civil service, he instituted something called Rae Days. Rather than have across the board job cuts and cutting back on the civil service, what he did is he forced all provincial public employees to take unpaid days off. They called them Rae Days. And that made him very unpopular with his union base because he abrogated a collective bargaining agreement. My attitude tended to be, wow, if a Labor Party is willing to abrogate a collective bargaining agreement, then imagine what the Liberals or the Conservatives would have done. But Canadian voters are famous. We love to bite the hand that feeds us. And he went down to defeat, and the NDP has never really recovered in this province. The other thing he did was he had promised to, when he ran for in that election in that year, in 1990, when he ran for election, one of his key campaign promises was to take auto insurance and make it a crown agency. It was going to be government run by the province of Ontario, similar to the manner in which it's run in Quebec and in Manitoba. And what was interesting was, at that time, the insurance industry was crying and saying, we lose money on auto insurance. We're losing too much money. We need reform to the auto insurance sector because we're losing money every year. And Bob Rae campaigned on taking it away from the private insurance industry and having it as a government agency. And then as soon as Bob Rae got elected, the insurance agencies of Ontario, the insurance industry in Ontario, then launched a public ad campaign telling people why you don't want the government running auto insurance. And it just struck me as funny because first we had the insurance agent in the insurance industry in Ontario telling the people of Ontario that we're losing money. We're every year we lose money on auto insurance, and then the government threatens to take it over, and you would think they would say, yay, take this money losing pig off our hands, but instead they fought to keep it. And Bob Rae is on record as saying that the reason he didn't bring it in is that there was so much going on, there was so much on the agenda, that it was too big a hurdle to circumvent in that first mandate. If he'd gotten a second mandate, he claims he would have. We'll never know because, as I say, the NDP never recovered after that election. Let me catch up. And I've got all kinds of people now writing. The live chat is getting filled up the way I like it. But if I don't keep up, I get Danny has shown up, and your tardiness, don't worry about it. I genuinely think that provided the Conservatives go to the polls in Ontario before the Trudeau Liberals have either the plug pulled on them or they call an election themselves, I think Ford will get reelected. If Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are still the governing party in Ottawa and Doug Ford pulls the plug, I do think Doug Ford and the Conservatives will win because of my entire 58 years on this planet, all 17 elections that have been conducted in Ontario since I was born in little Port Colborne, Ontario, Welland County. 17 elections, 16 of them, if the governing party in Ottawa is Liberal, we elect Conservative. If the governing party in Ottawa is Conservative, then we vote Liberal. And if Ford waits until after a federal election is called, which he can do, we just had a federal election in 2022. We don't need to have another until 2026. But he's going to go early because it's in his political best interest to do so. Let's read on what's being written in the chat. HM, everyone's saying hello. Sharunian is saying that the NDP, Canada and Ontario, they're two separate parties, but they are ideologically aligned. They are both heavily embedded with the labor movement, CAW, OPSU, QP. Labor unions are embedded deep within the New Democratic Party. They're the Labor Party of Canada, and they're the Labor Party of Ontario. And I don't think the NDP is any more or less spineless than any other political party. They're after their own self-interest. They're after their own survival. They want to win as many seats as they can. The more seats they win, the more funding they get, the more power they have, the more influence. They rack up their pensions. Anyway, Danny is writing, saying hi to Sharunian and saying that the libtards are spineless too. I actually think Doug Ford is spineless. Look what he did with the Greenbelt and how he talked about, protecting it. And then he met with some developers privately and it got recorded and he was, contravening what he was saying publicly about protecting the Greenbelt. And in fairness, I'm not big on environmentalism. I'm not a tree hugger by any stretch of the imagination. And this idea of anthropogenic climate change, I think, is garbage. Climate, I've talked about it too many times, but land management does matter. And when you take the watershed that is the Greenbelt north of Toronto, and when you develop it and concrete it over and pave it, what happens is the trees, the shrubs, the watershed, when you have a major rainstorm, that water gets absorbed. But when you concrete and pavement everything over, then that water has to find some place to go. The watershed has been removed. It's been replaced by buildings and pavement and concrete. The water has no place to go, so it funnels its way into creeks, ravines, tributaries that run into the Don River. And then the Don River gets inundated and we see flooding like we saw a few months ago down, I think it was down on Bayview Avenue, Mount Pleasant, right down along, the area just to the west of the Don River. And if you don't know downtown Toronto, just follow the Don Valley Parkway as you're heading south. The Don Valley River, the Don River, is on your right-hand side. And there's a rather steep escarpment or steep cliff up on the east side, but it's more of a lowland area to the west side. And that area got badly, badly flooded. And immediately the calls went out saying climate change, climate change. I say, no, My view is no, land management, land management. We've had major rainstorms going back for millennia, and we've had them going back decades and a century or more since Toronto has been a decent sized metropolis. But we've eliminated the watershed that would mitigate against flooding of the Don River. But now, thanks to, and it's not just Doug Ford, this has been going on for ages, but we need to protect that watershed. And it's this whole illusion that we get because human beings are herded into smaller and smaller areas. We get herded, and so it creates this illusion that, oh my gosh, everything's so crowded. I'll go up to Mount Albert, go up to Sundridge, go up to Parry Sound, and you'll see that this province is far from being overpopulated. This province has plenty of arable, livable land, but we cluster. Let's read on what's being said. Shurunyan saying, Gora is white guy and Kayla is black guy in Punjab, LOL. I don't know who Gora is. Unless that A was supposed to be a D. John 5. What really did Ford and our Ford dealings kidnap? Yes, it chronicled in the Globe and Mail newspaper, and it was a well-researched article. You can probably still find it. Just write, do a search, DuckDuckGo or whatever your engine is, and type in Doug Ford drug dealing. I think it was called the Imperial Plaza or something like that. And he used to deal primarily hash, which, nowadays is pretty much legal marijuana. But back then it wasn't. And just, a rich kid playing by his own rules. And now the Premier of Ontario. And, he knows how to play ball. I'll just put it that way. He knows how to play ball. The Premier of this province should have been Patrick Brown, but he got, like him or dislike him, he was taken out. CTV went to air with false allegations in the Me Too era that said he had sexually assaulted a girl in high school. And he later was able to totally tear that story to shreds. And CTV showed that it had absolutely zero journalistic integrity in going to air with the story, because the woman they had reporting on it, and her name I think was Rachel Ayayo, she was friends with one of the people making uncorroborated, unsubstantiated allegations against Patrick Brown. You don't do that in journalism. Not ethical journalism. If you want to engage in yellow smear journalism, fill your boots and go get a job with TASS news agency in Russia or some other totalitarian regime. And CTV, just a huge example of how corrupt our media is. And I can take this off in a million different tangents. Unfortunately, I had a few conversations over the last few days talking about the fact that anyone with two brain cells to rub together now knows that you cannot trust the mainstream media at all. The difficulty is that you equally cannot trust what you see online. Even a guy like me, you can't trust what I have to say, because for all you know, I could be accused of being bombastic and playing the clickbait game to generate views, because everyone online is hooked on engagement and just wants likes and clicks and views and subscriptions. I saw someone promoting the idea that Donald Trump has just named Alex Jones as his White House press secretary, which I can find nothing to corroborate that, nothing to substantiate it. But I'm sure that guy's video, probably, I didn't click on it, but it probably got tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, maybe millions of views. Because holy cow, Alex Jones. And at the time, and I looked at it and I saw it came across my feed, I'm going, that I don't believe it. But at the same time, I can't completely dismiss it either, because we're dealing with Donald Trump here and he's a loose cannon. I do what I want. So could he do it? It's possible, but I don't think Donald Trump will go that far with Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones is just too tainted, even too controversial an individual for someone like Donald Trump. Anyway, catching up. So yeah, search that out, John 5. Betty Zoom wrote, Ford, bad people, drug dealers all their lives. He was in Chicago when his brother was mayor. Then he passes and Doug's up. Yeah, next in line. I actually, one of the things where Rob Ford rose to prominence was he put out a YouTube type video, might have been on YouTube, where he laid down all the perks that a Toronto City Councilman got. And he showed, here's my zoo pass. You, Joe Citizen, this will cost you $780 a year. Parking's probably going to cost you another $300-400 a year. But if you're on council, you get them free. And you put the cards down. Here are passes for me to play at Toronto City area golf courses. If you're going to go play golf, it's going to cost you $40-50. Me, City Council, I get to go for free. TTC pass costs $100, whatever a month, $1,000+ a year. But when you're a councilman, you get it for free. And he went through all these things, the museums, Ontario Place, all these government-funded enterprises, Casa Loma being another one, and how much he got in perks, as the great unwashed would be spending. If we wanted to access everything he had access to, we'd probably be spending thousands of dollars a year. The only thing was, with that little diatribe of his, is the actual cost to the city. It didn't cost the taxpayers of Toronto anything, really. It was a perk. It was a benefit of being in that, having a position on Toronto City Council. But the cost to the city for issuing these things was zero. How much did it cost them to give everyone on town city council a TTC pass? The province paid, or rather the city of Toronto paid zero. How much did it cost? How much did they have to pay to get out these free golf passes or the Metro Toronto Zoo passes? The cost to the city of Toronto was zero. The cost of the paper, the cost of the plastic laminated card for the DTC. That was it. But it played very well to disgruntled, struggling, and who isn't struggling in today, in the economy. Doesn't matter whether it was the 80s, the 90s, 2010s, 2020s. Denny's saying that apparently Ford had great hash. Can't speak to that myself. I might have even known Doug Ford. Who knows? I lived in Etobicoke for a very brief time between moving from New York City to and then later to New Jersey. Spent a very short time living on Daly Avenue in Etobicoke, a few months when I was like 3-4, in around that age. I have very vague memories of it, but I do remember it. But so it's possible I might have been around Doug Ford, but I don't remember. Let's read on what's being said. HM is writing about, getting back to David Peterson and his arrogance. Oh man, was he arrogant. He thought he was going to win, no problem. I've got a lot of messages here that I've got to Great hash. I suppose it could be true. Peterson was arrogant. Okay, John 5 writes, I heard rumors for Justin Trudeau in that line of work as well, but I cannot know if really true. Uh, I would almost think that if you're Justin Trudeau, the best time for the Liberals, for the Trudeau Liberals to run an election as well, at least in terms of Ontario, is to do it while the Conservatives are ruling in Queen's Park. So it could be a race to the gun to see who can pull the trigger first. If the Liberals pull the trigger first, because the only way I could see a federal election happening is if Justin Trudeau goes to the Governor General, whatever the woman's name is, Simon, I think it is. If he goes to her and says, I want the legislature to dissolve for the purpose of calling a general election, that's the only way I see an election being called. I do not see the Conservatives, NDP, and Bloc Québécois, all three getting together at the same time and voting no confidence. I expect the Bloc Québécois will prop up the Liberals or the NDP, one of the two. I think the Conservatives want an election as soon as possible, but I think the NDP and the Bloc Québécois are playing at a game where they're trying to be anti-Trudeau Liberals, but at the same time, they don't want to defeat the government either, because they know they're right now, as things stand, they're heading to a crushing defeat, and that the Conservatives are going to win 200 plus, maybe 230, 240 seats. They're going to win a massive majority the way things sit right now. Reading on. Betty's saying that's touchy right now. So many stories are flying about. Oh, they are. Danny is quoting his favorite, Jesus is forever. I've got my unfortunately water damaged old King James Bible that was my great grandmother's. The Bible, my 50-year-old Bible that I read pretty much every day at work. I left it at work today. My Oxford Annotated Study Bible that I got at university. My youngest wanted to read Jonah tonight. We were talking about it. And so I told him to take that one because I'm not going to ask him to read the King James. So that leaves me with this one. Thankfully, I have more, and I have one more in a bookshelf. It's also standard revised. It's called the Fire Bible, a study Bible, complete with notes, study notes. Let's see. Betty's saying she's a bad speller tonight. Hey, we're all bad spellers. Danny is writing, and I didn't know Danny was ex-military as well. Lowe's being even a little bit late. A little late equals a little dead. There's a saying in the military, if you're not 10 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. And people hate, there's a great story, and I forget exactly how it goes, but it goes something like this. The base commander, Colonel, Light Colonel, calls in his 2IC, second in command, tells him, I want everyone on the parade square for a major announcement. Have everyone on the parade square at 9 a.m. So the major then calls the sergeant major, and the sergeant major is told, well, the colonel said 9 a.m. So the major tells the sergeant major, have everyone on the parade square at 8:30. Then the sergeant major calls his warrants together, and the warrants are told to have everyone on the parade square at 8 a.m. Then the warrants gather their sergeants, and the sergeants tell everyone to be there at 8 a.m. And then the sergeants tell their master corporals, tell everyone to be there at 7:30 a.m. And you see how it's going. And then what happens is the privates and corporals are all lining the parade square at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning for what is to be a 9 a.m. parade. And at 8:45, word comes down from the colonel that the parade's been canceled and that everyone's to remuster on the parade square for noon. And that's where one private turns to another and goes, God, I hate the Army. And that is actually very true. Everyone just adds time and adds time and adds time. I used to work with a guy last name O'Malley, good common name. And he was in the Navy, and he would never show up early. He would always show up right on time, because he would say, well, if I get told to be there at 9, it's for something that's starting at 10. So I'm getting there right at 9. And he never showed up early, and he never got in trouble either. And Danny's saying, with respect to Betty's typos, misspellings, don't worry, happens to the best of us, happens to everyone. And when you're typing or texting on a phone, forget it. Danny's bringing up that he's writing, admitted FEMA workers were told to skip houses with Trump signs. What the heck? No kidding. The U.S. election, things are dicey right now. I'm tending to... I watched a video earlier tonight or yesterday. I think it was this evening when I watched it. And it was saying, it was by CBN, Christian Broadcast News, saying that Trump's life is in danger. That when you go up against the quote unquote deep state, the intelligence apparatus, the judicial apparatus, the government at the federal level is beastly. And it's a beast with many heads, to give things a biblical reference, Revelation. You're dealing with a multi-headed beast. And when you take on that multi-headed beast, you put a target on yourself. And I know that some believe that the Trump, the one in Butler, Pennsylvania, with this Thomas Crooks kid, some believe that was staged. Wrestling type squib on the ear, and that it was all theater to help reelect Donald Trump, and that he's part of the machinery. I don't dismiss that point of view. I'm not going to gaslight anyone who holds that point of view. I think there is definitely legitimacy to that argument. That is to say, I do think you can make a legitimate argument. Doesn't mean you're right, but I think it's a fair argument to make. But I myself personally, I don't believe it. I think Trump is something of a radical. I don't think he's a Doug Ford. Doug Ford is going to toe the party line. Doug Ford's going to do what he's told. I think Donald Trump has the capacity. He's a loose cannon. They don't know what exactly he's going to do. By appointing someone like RFK Jr., who's now got the new slogan, Make America Healthy Again, you have a lot of embedded interests. If you take a look at the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry, we have, and this has been written of many times, even by the NIH itself, the National Institutes of Health, that there is a revolving door between the regulatory agencies that oversee the pharmaceutical industry and the pharmaceutical industry itself. Individuals go from one to the other. They leave the pharmaceutical industry, they go and work for government regulatory agencies, and then they leave the regulatory agencies and they go back to work for the pharmaceutical industry. And so it's the old adage of the hens watching the fox, or the foxes watching the hen house. And Robert Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy Jr., if he does what he says he's going to do, it's going to upset a lot of very entrenched and very powerful players within this so-called deep state. And I think January 20th, it's a lifetime away. I think it's 70-ish days, 60, 70 days away. And so much can happen. Could we see another Butler, Pennsylvania? I think, this whole term conspiracy theory, what I've read, and maybe someone can enlighten me on this beyond this, but this whole term conspiracy theory, from what I understand, came out of those who dared to question the official Warren Commission findings on the Kennedy assassination, that Lee Harvey Oswald, with a magic bullet and supernatural marksmanship, was able to hit a moving target with a single bullet that defied the laws of physics, the magic bullet theory. And that was the official version. If anyone dared question that, if anyone dared speculate that there were additional shooters on the grassy knoll behind the picket fence or any of these other theories that were out there at the time, they were the term conspiracy theory was thrown on them, and they were gaslit and marginalized. And ever since that time, as I understand it, that's how this term has been 9/11. You want to question 9/11? Well, you're a conspiracy theorist. And yeah, I don't run away from the term conspiracy theorist, because people conspire, and powerful interests conspire. And sometimes those conspiracies are engaging in activities which could be deemed criminal conspiracies. And just because something doesn't get caught doesn't mean it didn't happen. O.J. Simpson was acquitted of the murder. Now, that wasn't a conspiracy. The defense found him not. His defense attorney, whatever his name was, Johnny Cochran, managed to have O.J. Simpson found guilty, but he was always said to have been a lone gunman. But you're not crazy if you think he was guilty, and if he got off on, if you don't think the verdict was the correct verdict. You're not crazy for thinking that. And you're not crazy if you don't buy in to the accepted version or the official version of 9/11 being Osama bin Laden hiding off in some caves in Afghanistan using flip phone, cell phone technology to subvert the world's security and intelligence apparatuses. It's not a conspiracy theory. That's a reasonable postulation, which any sane, rational person can come to. Anyway, I'm going off on all kinds of tangents. But Danny writing that, FEMA workers, I've heard that. And it would not surprise me in the least. I look at the whole 2020 election. I was just looking at this within the last day or two. And the voting requirements for mail-in ballots for varying states. Some states required no signature, and some states that did require a signature, the vetting of the signature verification varied from place to place. In some places, it would just be some low-level election official going, yeah, they look good to me. And that would be the degree to which, and we're told this is a legitimate election. I mean, we all know Joe Biden, 82 million votes in that 2020 election. And really? There's a great graph going along showing the vote in 2016, the vote in 2020, the vote in 2024. And you see 26, you can go back even further to Obama, and the Democratic vote just climbs marginally each election. And then in 2020, it goes way up, and then in 2024, it goes way down. That election smelled. But they gaslight you. Anyone who suggests that there was anything untoward with the mail-in ballots, well, you've got to prove it. Well, how do you prove something when the mechanisms aren't in place? Show me the ballots. Show me the verification. We're dealing with millions of ballots here. How are you going to check each one? Okay, well, that means it's legitimate, because it's impossible to verify each signature. I've got to accept that the result was legitimate. Not doing it. Betty writes, I was looking abandoned places in Saskatchewan. I came upon something weird. Certus, C-E-R-T-U-S, limited by Superior Plus Corporation. Not sure, but I think I found some unknown money. Okay. Hey, God love you. Danny writes, trust, yes, verify, question everything. Absolutely. And the most important times to question things is when they cater to your bias, when when you have an inclination to agree and say, yeah, check yourself, I have to do this, and I've been caught where I haven't, where I've gone out and shared something because I'm like, there, finally proof. And then I find out later that what I was sharing was erroneous, was false, and it makes me look bad. So I try and be as circumspect as I can, especially when things cater to my bias. And Betty Zoom is writing that it was a Battle Creek helium plant. Okay. And Betty Zoom heard that he said he will not help Canada. Donald Trump. Yeah. No, he's America first. But I will say this as a Canadian, that a strong U.S. economy is good for Canada, irrespective of tariffs and what have you. If the American economy is doing well, a rising tide lifts all boats, and our boat is right. And, we may be a little yacht next to the U.S. aircraft carrier, but a rising tide lifts all boats. And when our biggest trading ally, Canada's single biggest trading ally, has a booming economy, it will help this country. We just got to get our own books in order, and we have to tackle our own deep state. And unfortunately, the way the political framework works in Canada, it's a lot more difficult. You can't, a guy like Donald Trump cannot become Prime Minister of Canada. The closest we've had is what's his name, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank personality. He tried to run for the Conservative Party leadership, but he doesn't have the reach inside the Conservative Party apparatus. And it's an old boys club. It's an old boys network. He would have to go out and be a one-man wrecking crew, signing up new members to overwhelm that system. Can't be done. It's not like in the United States where people are either registered as Democrats, Republicans, or independents. It's not like that. Canada here, you have to pony up some cash and you have to become a member of a party, and most people simply can't be bothered. And so for someone like Kevin O'Leary to come in and try and storm the system, storm the Bastille, and become leader of the Conservative Party, he had no chance. He couldn't. I can't remember whether he ran against Andrew Scheer or if it was against the time that Aaron O'Toole won. But whichever one it was, he did not do well at all, because all these guys, and Pierre Poilievre is one of them, but Scheer, Poilievre, Aaron O'Toole, these are basically lifetime politicians, and they have their tentacles spread throughout the party apparatus. And a guy coming from the outside, the way Donald Trump in the US, it can't, I don't want to say it cannot be done, but it is far more difficult for a rank outsider to crash the political system in Canada than it is in the United States. Donald Trump is something of an anomaly. There's never been anyone as famous as him crash the political system and come in with absolutely zero political experience whatsoever. And, and then to lose and then come back again is unbelievable. But anyway, Danny's writing, Alex Jones replacing KJP. What a breath of fresh air that would be. Yeah, as I say, I think that was just clickbait, but apparently it has some life, because someone might have been an Onion type article, and Alex Jones says that he's accepting it, and it was all just a bunch of online banter that got taken too far. I don't think there's a scintilla of credibility to this idea of Alex Jones becoming the White House press secretary. Never going to happen. And KJP, I don't even know that woman's name. I know what she looks like, and I have trouble listening to her. the last time I remember the name of a White House press secretary was George W. Bush's Ari Fleischer. And I didn't mind him. I thought he was really good at his role. I didn't always like what he had to say, but I thought he handled things well. And Betty Zoom liked Rob Ford. A lot of people did. Although I think he was a bit of a bully, but Danny writes, Rob might have been an admitted crackhead, but he was able to run Toronto, unlike Chow, who's destroying Toronto. I'm glad I don't live in Toronto now that she's running it. Danny is talking about the Royal Highland Regiment again. Kilt wearing black watch. I'll comment on one thing. Having done a Remembrance Day parade years ago, and I forget where, but it was the first time and maybe the only time that I had to march to bagpipes. And we had to practice because there's a video that went, and I think it was from Edmonton. I think it was from out in Alberta. And they showed a video of cadets, legionnaires, active service member parading to the bagpipes. And you saw some what is called bear marching, where the foot and the arms are going out at the same time instead of, it's supposed right hand as the left foot, it's opposite. As the left foot goes forward, the right arm goes forward, and the marching was bad. But marching, it was a Remembrance Day service, and the marching was being done by active service members. It was being done by legionnaires, and it was being done by cadets. And there was probably zero rehearsal, and marching to bagpipes, the pace is incredibly slow. And you can't help when you're on parade marching and being affected by those around you. And that's why you practice, to get everyone in step and to bang your heel down so you can hear that cadence. And I wish people would be a little more kind when they see something like that. What matters is they showed up, they were there, they were on parade, whether they're a cadet, whether they're active, whether they're legionnaire, whatever the case. So just a little bit about that. Betty is writing, actually, this is my first time watching what politics do, and wow, there are bad people, take people's hard-earned money and gamble. Hank Holiday, friend from Texas, is down here, or up here, or wherever, digital here. Betty Zoom, so I believe if they get $2 million after working 4 years, all people of Canada can. The one thing I've always thought is that we should take military personnel should be given the same pensions that our politicians get. Because I think the members of Canada's armed forces do more for this country than any politician. But of course, I'm biased. I'm ex-military, so. But it bothers me that someone gets elected, I think they have to be in 6 years, and then they're basically set for life. And they're already making, if you're a backbench MP in Ottawa, you're already making in salary and benefits probably $250,000 a year to begin with. So look after your own damn pension. Take out an RSP, and or that, or severely cut their salary. So Betty's saying, hit the like button, thank you. And Betty also says, so does that work for military then? When the balloons were in the skies, U.S. were to save us? I'm not understanding what you're writing. So how does that work for military? When the balloons were in the skies, U.S. were to save us. I'm not understanding exactly what your comment means. HM is writing about KJP has such a big head. It's that the way she blows out her fro. And I'm so tired of the woke liberal politics. If nothing else, I'm hoping this comes all crashing down. and that we get back to some common sense. I was actually, my young guy, I may have a video to do in some time. I'm going to talk about the book of Jonah, which is an amazing book. And I've just been revisiting it, and it's happening at an interesting time in my life that this is coming up, but I'm not prepared to talk about it right now. But Jonah is a book of the Bible that non-Christians love to poke fun at, because they, Jonah getting swallowed by a whale, and they think, people look at one of the deepest books of the Bible, one of the most meaningful, one of the most substantial books. And Jesus references it, for goodness sakes, hundreds of years later in the New Testament. And it's an incredibly layered, deep, and meaningful story. And people want to reduce it to the most banal and say, and make it an analysis of the gastrointestinal workings of a great fish or whale. And that's as deep as they're willing to go. And there's so much more meaning, so much more depth to it. And it's starting to come home to me in my own personal life. And some stuff that I've got to wrestle with, because we all wrestle. I've quoted many times Paul's reference in one of his letters that we're all to work out our own salvation through fear and trembling. And when you're standing in front of the maker of heaven and earth, the creator of the cosmos, the universe, the heavens, the seas, the land, everything, if you're not in fear and trembling of a power that can create all that, then I'm going to say you're a fool. Maybe just ignorant, but a fool. And John's writing, what about Ms. Pisakis? I'm not familiar with that one. I try and keep up with things as much as I can, but there's just too much out there to keep up with everything. So I'm not familiar with the name Pisakis. And I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. Could be just Sakis. Betty Zoom is saying, with respect to the pensions, politicians versus military, that when the military puts it, they're like, you sign a blank check, unlimited liability, putting my life at risk. I've written a blank check. If you want to send me into harm's way, I've got to obey. I've got to follow orders. Betty Zoom's writing Chinese. Betty Zoom's writing, I was listening to the smartest guy in the world, Langton, think his name was. He spoke of Jesus. He said, yes, he is there. IQ 210, I think. Wow. I'm not familiar with Langton, or however the name. Oh, don't worry, Betty. No problem. So sorry for no big unifying thought. I kind of rambled, as I always do. And I thank everyone who's given me a like so far, 7 of them so far. But, just tying this back to what I said, in Ontario, I do think we're going to see an election. And I think quite possibly it could be days or even weeks away. I don't think we'll get to the spring, but that I'll go with my buddy, local mayor. I'll go with his, because he's dialed in far more with the provincial conservatives than I am. And it is coming. It's going to be an election, and we'll see what happens. I mean, at the end of the day, the agenda that we're living under, this whole idea of climate change and multiple health crises, bird flu, swine flu, COVID, RSV, influenza, respiratory virus season, scary wars in Ukraine, war in the Middle East. Goodness knows, could have a war between China and Taiwan. We had that recent incident that happened in the Netherlands with the Israeli soccer fans being attacked in the street, and what appears to have been a coordinated and planned assault on people of the Jewish faith. This is boiling, and it's going to come to Canada, and this kind of civil, whether it be health, climate, civil unrest, war, all these storm clouds can be used as a pretext by the government to impose itself even deeper and deeper into our own personal lives. And boy, oh man, we have to push back. And the best way to push back on it is to get into relationship with the author of all truth, because we know the enemy lies and we know who the liars are. So sorry for the wheeled all over the place video, but it is what it is. It is what I do. Thank you for watching. Thank you. Oh, I can't go through all the names. Hank and Betty and HM and Danny and Sharunian and John 5. I hope I didn't miss anyone who commented. I think I said HM. I think I got everyone. Man, the live chat was full, and I probably missed some of them. And sometimes it's hard to know exactly when you're typing what you're referencing, because I'm sometimes late reading. But fun times. Tomorrow's Sunday. If you get a chance, get out to church. Find yourself a good one. Get into the Word, and you're welcome, HM. And I'm rambling now, so I'm going to leave you. And you know the way I like to end it. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord grant you peace, even in these crazy, mixed up, unsettling times of the ground shifting under your feet. Put your feet on the solid rock that doesn't move. I'll talk to you. Probably going to do one tomorrow night. Good night now.